Hello everyone, and welcome to another MagickLorelai Rambles. Today's subject is one that is deeply personal to me. I want to talk about depression. I know that I've talked about it before in many of my videos, and I know that I've even made a special video called The Stigma of Mental Health around the time that Robin Williams passed away, because I wanted to discuss, or at least touch on, the subject of how depression affects us and how we as a culture don't really talk about it. It's one of those things that kind of gets swept under the rug or pushed to the corner where we don't have to think about it regularly. And as a result, a lot of people don't actually understand what depression is. So I want to issue a bit of a trigger warning to anyone watching this video, because I'm going to be talking about, in great depth, depression, both what it means to me and how it affects, all of us, but more personally, what my life experience has been like with it. This also includes discussion of suicide, suicidal ideation, and other related topics. So if you're concerned about that triggering you, I suggest perhaps not watching this video today. That said, you may have noticed that in the past I have had some trouble keeping to a consistent updating schedule. Sometimes it's just as a couple of days. Sometimes it's as little as maybe 1 or 2 weeks without an update from me, which is a long time without an update, but it's still not a huge amount of time. Like, some people take a couple of weeks to themselves anyway. But if you go far back enough, you will actually find 2 instances where I did not update for 5 to 6 months at a time. And that is because of how my depression affects me. Because you see, I love recording Let's Plays. It's one of the few things that I do still enjoy and really get a lot out of. So if I have a period of time where I can't work up the energy to do it, it's because my mental health is just choking the energy out of me. And during those times, I was going through a really difficult period in my life, both times, and it was just not something that I could cope with. And something in me, the part of me that loves making these videos, just stopped. Because if I were to make a video during that time, it would have been, alright, hello everyone, I guess we're doing this again, and we're going to keep going with, I don't even remember where we left off. And I don't want to make that video, and I don't think you guys want to see that video. And that's the thing with depression and how it affects you. It's not just a general sense of sadness. And it's not just an unshakable sadness. Most of us have experienced depression at some point in our lives. Usually after some kind of traumatic or deeply saddening event in our life. Sometimes after a series of bad events in our lives. Not the book series, just a personal series of unfortunate events. And we all understand what it feels like to not really be able to pull out of that sadness, at least for a little bit of time, but eventually most people are able to come out of that and think, oh, well, I was able to get over it. But clinical depression is a little bit different, which is not to say that experiencing depression temporarily is not as valid as clinical depression. Both of these things affect us very personally and affect things like our motivation, our energy, our ability to get on and do the things that we love, the ability to love the things that we love. But clinical depression is something that goes really far, a lot farther. For me, I can't think of a time in my life when I was not affected by depression. For me, it's just been a fact of my life, ever since I was a kid. And to this day, it's, even knowing as much as I do about it, even knowing what happens when my mood dips below a certain point, that doesn't stop it from hurting me, and that doesn't stop it from creating a really negative narrative in my head. And once that starts going, I don't enjoy anything. I don't enjoy the things that I love. I can listen to music and think this means nothing to me. I can watch videos, but I won't take in anything. I won't hear what's being said. I won't acknowledge the story. I will be in this fog where I can't think of anything but how much I hate myself and how much everyone else must hate me. Part of why I'm making this video today, because I've been meaning to make this video for a while, is because I'm actually in the middle of one of my mental health dips. And I can intellectually separate myself from it. I can know that what's happening is that my mental health is affecting me. But at the same time, I still hate myself. I still don't see value in the things that I do and the things that I love. I become very self-destructive during these little bouts with depression. And it is a struggle to put myself back in a place where I'm not constantly saying horrible things to myself, about myself. So, it's not just sadness. I have a friend, actually, and she provided a very interesting insight that makes sense to me. She used to be one of those people that was actually, a fairly happy individual. I mean, not always happy, but fairly optimistic. And that anytime she started to feel sad, she was able to sort of just tell herself, okay, that was sad, but just be happy, and then she would make herself happy again, or at least put herself in a better frame of mind. She experienced a very serious illness, and when she came out the other side of that, because of the treatment that she had received for her illness and the way that her illness had changed her on just a physical level, she developed depression as a result of that. And for the first time in her life, she experienced being unhappy, being depressed, and not being able to mentally tell herself to get out of it. And for me, this was kind of interesting to hear, because even though I intellectually knew that, mental health mental illness is an illness, and it is something that you can't control, to hear someone else relay that experience, that, oh, it really isn't something that you can just pull yourself out of. It was very gratifying to hear, because as a culture, we just tell ourselves to get over it, to tell ourselves to be happier, to focus on the things that we love, to focus on things that make us happy, and that if we fake it, to fake it until you make it. That if we fake a smile, then eventually we'll be smiling for real. That sort of thing. But I will say that, I can feel temporarily better if I pretend I'm happier, but it also takes more energy for me to pretend that I'm happy when I'm not. So by the end of that, when I'm no longer able to pretend, not only have I lost whatever energy that I needed to sustain myself, but I have also, now drained myself completely. And now I'm even all the more sad because I tried my hardest and couldn't pull myself out again. Depression is not just a temporary feeling. It is not just sadness. There are actually physical aches and pains that are associated with the mental illness. There is an effect on our physical state because of the chemicals, because of the inability to produce the serotonin in order to function on a normal level. Personally speaking, I can speak to a sort of brain fog that can drop in from time to time. I've had a lot of trouble remembering certain things. I generally have a pretty good memory, but then I have a lot of trouble remembering names, for example. You could tell it to me 5 billion times, and I may not always be able to internalize it. There are things that I forget. And more than just the typical, I forgot that I had to do this, but literally I have years of my life that I don't remember because I was so deeply wrapped in my depression that I didn't think of anything but how sad I was. I mean, it's more than just that, but literally it was something that for me was so hard to get through that my brain just did not imprint anything from that period in my life. There are things that I don't remember clearly, and there are things that I can't always think through easily. And, being able to focus is very difficult, especially when my mood has dropped significantly. Which is one of the other reasons why it's hard to work up the motivation, because I can sit there staring at the screen wanting to draw something or wanting to record something, but trying to focus on what I would need to do next, it just slides out of my mind. And the only thing that I can think of is that I want to go back to sleep or something along that. I've had a lot of trouble both with sleeping in the first place, and then sometimes after several days of only getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep at night, or at a time anyway, and then I'll just reboot and sleep for 10 to 12 hours. And I'll still feel tired afterwards. I'll still feel completely exhausted and worn out. And it's very difficult to just try and power through that. And there are some days when I can be in the midst of that and still force myself to get up and go about my business, and then at the end of the day, I'm just even worse off than when I started. I mentioned that I'm in the middle of a mental health dip right now. I get very self-destructive when this happens. I try to destroy my own support network. I tend to isolate from my friends, even the people who I know care about me and who I know don't want to see me upset, who want to help me when I get like this. But my brain tells me that my friends don't like me. I mean, I've had trust issues my whole life. I haven't had a lot of friends who've really stuck it out with me. I've got literally people that I can count on one hand that have managed to actually be there for me in such a way as to persist as friends in my mind even when I get like this. And it takes a lot to build that trust, and sometimes when my brain starts to fall apart, all it takes is a snippet of my paranoia, and I'll run with it, and I'll hurt people. I'll hurt the people that I care the most because I can't think of anything but how much I hurt, and how I want to cut off from everyone before they make it worse, because when I'm feeling vulnerable, I definitely don't want to open up, and I don't want to be a burden to other people. I don't want to lay this on someone else's head. And I don't want to hurt my friends, because if anyone else hurts my friends, I will, beat the fuck out of anyone who hurts my friends. I care about people very deeply. And I get very protective of anyone who enters into my personal sphere. You know, I get super protective. I mean, even if, I'm going to say this, if you are a viewer of my videos and someone comes after one of you guys, I will get protective of you guys. I will verbally beat down anyone. And I swear I hate it when people are assholes to each other, but especially if you are in that sphere that I'm aware of you and that you are there. I don't like people being assholes to each other. I'm very protective of other people, but I'm not protective of myself. Most days I don't like myself. And it's hard because intellectually I can look at the things that people might like. I can see my videos, which I am very proud of. I can see my art, which I can see that I've worked on, and I know that I've worked on it. I can see the things that I've written and the things that I've worked on. And I can see people enjoying them. But when my mental health dips like this, I doubt that people like it. I doubt that people enjoy what I do, that people like me, that I don't see any value to myself or of myself to other people, because I have had my whole life, I've been told how worthless I am. My whole life, I have felt like an outsider that was never included. I've never been somebody's best friend. And it's hard for me to do that because once you fall into that cycle of not liking yourself and then hurting the people around you when you're afraid of hurting them, rather ironically, people are not always equipped to handle that. And I do want to say that I don't expect everyone to be able to handle me at my worst, because I can't handle me at my worst, and I don't expect anyone else to. But when I struggle with my depression, you know, I can't objectively look at myself, and I can't like myself. And I know that seems like such a simple statement, and it kind of is, but I look at my relationships with other people, and I look at where I am in my life, and it's really kind of, I mean, okay, backtracking a little bit here. So, I mentioned before, my entire life has pretty much been defined by my depression, and this is true. When I was in school, I didn't have any motivation to do the homework. I would like to think of myself as an intelligent person, and most often when it came to tests, I was able to regurgitate all of the information to get pretty much straight A's on all of the tests, but the homework, I was not able to do. From a very young age, I mean, I was like second, third grade, and I was not turning in homework because I didn't care about it. It didn't seem important to me. And more than just because the education system fails us, that in itself is an entirely different subject, but because the only thing I wanted to do when I got home was just either watch TV or play with my dolls, I mean, when I was that young, or just, you know, spend time with myself. But and so I had many experiences where teachers would think that I wasn't retaining the material, and then I would do the tests, and they would get frustrated because they could see that I was, but I just wasn't doing the homework. Anyway, as a result of the lack of homework, my grades went down significantly. My options following high school were limited because I spent most of my high school years especially just wrapped. I mean, this was the period of my life that I remember the least, to be quite honest. But yeah, wrapped up in how much I hated myself. And I didn't skip school because I was paranoid of what would happen as a result of that, but I spent that entire time not wanting to be there. What few friends I made, I guess I didn't treat them as well as I should have, and I regret that to this day. A lot of this is tied again to my tendency to hurt people that are close to me because I don't trust myself, and so I don't trust other people. And I regret everyone that I've ever hurt. I really do. But anyway, I was not really included in a lot of social circles, and I was not, very active in school life. It was just something that I floated through. When I got to college, it was the same thing, only now because there was a lot more personal freedom, I spent thousands of dollars to not go to class. Thousands of dollars to be too depressed to work on anything that needed to be worked on. I had many classes that I just straight up stopped attending because I couldn't work up the motivation to get out of bed. And after a couple of years of trying and, wasting money and failing and barely holding on, I stopped attending school because I didn't want it to be continued in that same vein of failure. And as a result of that, I do not have a degree, which limits my options for finding a job or finding a career. So you can see how this all starts to kind of tie back into my ability to find things I like about myself, because I look at my continuous failure, my attempts to try, my attempts to try and succeed in such a way that I can keep up with everyone around me. And it didn't work. And there's just this continuous failure that I am now stuck in, where I try to do something and it doesn't work, and I don't have the tenacity or the motivation to keep up with it, and so it inevitably fails again, and it just becomes this vicious cycle. And it's hard for me to see myself in the context of success because I have never been successful. And I say that with over 3,000 subscribers, almost 4,000 subscribers on YouTube, because it's hard for me to see that as, I know that it's a success. Like, I can look at that and see, wow, people are resonating with what I'm doing, but then part of me is also, but this isn't really a success. Of those 3,000 subscribers, I'm lucky if I get 200 views on my videos, which I know is petty to look at, but that means that I'm retaining a very small percentage of the interest of people who are subscribed to me. And that does bother me, because it means that people are not watching my videos, people are not interested in my videos, even people that have been previously interested in my videos have fallen out with that. And it's hard to see the value in the stuff that I do when I manage to lose the interest of people that came to me at one point for entertainment. So it becomes a very difficult cycle where I try to keep going on these things because at some point persistence has to pay off. And sometimes just continuing even when I feel nothing is the only thing that I can do. But at times like this, when my mental health is no longer cooperating with me, and it's not even just a feeling of emptiness or apathy, but I struggle with suicidal ideation. In the last couple of days, I have really had a lot of trouble with wanting to kill myself. And wishing I was no longer here. Seeing the friends that I've lost, the people that I've hurt, the people that I've failed, including myself. And the thing is that I am afraid of the idea of hurting myself. At the same time that I don't want to, I'm so tired of being here. And if there was an undo button that would just take me out, I probably would have hit it by now. One that would erase me and all of the damage that I've done since I've been here. I also have not taken my life because once when I was 14 years old, this was probably at least a zenith of my depression, I had worked out a suicide plan. See, during that time, I had some days where I got off of my classes really early in the day, sometime around 1 in the afternoon, and I would be done with my school day. So I had plenty of time from the time that I got home to when my mother would be getting home in the evening to enact any plans that I wanted to. And so I made a whole plan one day. Well, I had made the plan over a period of time, but I had a plan to enact it on one of those days when I had gotten off early, to come home, to overdose on some of my mother's pills because her health has not been the best over the years, and I had access to her medical cabinet. And I'd planned to do that. I'd planned to leave a note explaining what I had wanted following my death, and to apologize to everyone. I remember on my way home, I had started to cross the street, and I had accidentally kind of tripped. And the way that I fell was that I threw my hands up, and then I fell. And it looked like I did this fancy little jazz move. And I remember just in that state of mind where I knew that I was going to die that evening, that the image of how that must have looked to the car who had been sitting there waiting for me to cross was so silly, of someone doing a random jazz move in front of their car, that I started laughing. And it was It was the laughter of feeling, it was, there is a certain peace of mind that you get into once you actually do decide to kill yourself. It's a place that is not happy, but it doesn't hurt as much. And I was able to laugh at how silly that was because I didn't have to hurt anymore after that day. And so I got home. And my mother was sitting there at the computer because she'd had an appointment that day that I did not know about. And she decided that instead of going back to work, she was just going to come home. On the one day that I had decided that I was going to take my life, my mother happened to be home. And of course, it was such a simple thought at the time. I thought, oh, I guess I can't do it today. And I went into the living room. And I sat there. It must have been 3 or 4 hours, because when I sat down it was still early afternoon, and by the time anything else had happened, it was already dark out. I was sitting in almost complete darkness. I hadn't even turned on the television. I hadn't done anything but sit there and think about how close I had come to just taking my life, and about the coincidence that my mother had been there. How that one thing had disrupted the whole plan, and how important it was that I had been disrupted from that state of mind. I called her into the room after I had finished, and I said, Mom, I wanted to commit suicide today. And we talked, and she took me to the hospital, where I talked with some other people. I talked with some doctors. And I ended up staying there for, I think, overnight. I can't even remember. I can't even remember what happened, because it was just one of those things where my mind doesn't like to think about it. But it had been so much of a coincidence, and it had been so important to me that I made a vow that if I do die, or when I die, that it's not going to be by my own hands. And it was a very powerful thing. I made this vow with God. And when I say God, I don't necessarily mean any particular denomination, but I, without getting too deep into my own personal beliefs, with what I view as the divine entity in the universe, I made a vow that it was not going to be by my own hands. And that's powerful enough that even to this day, I still feel like it was an important communication. That today is not that day. Today it's not going to be by my hands. And if you're watching this, and you're feeling like you've gotten to that point yourself, like maybe today is the day, please let this be your disruption. You are still loved, even if you can't see it. You are still here. You are still important. Not because you're a special snowflake, but because you have importance to more than just yourself or other people. You are a unique perspective in this world, and you have to be here. Because this is what I have to remind myself every time, that I would not have been disrupted that day if it hadn't been for more. If there wasn't more for me someday. Maybe I haven't hit that point. Maybe I already have. I don't know. But try to find the things that you love. And try to find the value in yourself. I know it's not easy. I'm struggling with this right now. Know that it is your mind working against you, spinning a negative narrative that you do not have to believe. I've held on to one phrase for almost my entire life. This too shall pass. 4 words, but it's true. The hardship right now, the darkness, the bleakness, the feeling isolated, the feeling alone, and everything else, it will also pass, and good things will come. It may not always stay good. I've had good things come, I've had bad things happen. I kind of sway back and forth between the two myself, but I say this, dealing with depression, it's not something that can be controlled, but it's something that can be coped with. And if you can get help, if you can start seeing a counselor or a therapist, if you can get medication, and I'm going to say my experience with the right medication is not that it turns you into a zombie, but it gives you balance. It stops you from tipping over the edge, and that's the important thing. Don't write off medication, because it can balance the garbage, the soupy mess in your head, and make you feel neutral. And not empty, but just not sad as a default. And I encourage you to talk about what you're going through, either in the comments here or with other people. And you're not always going to run into sympathy, and I know that. I want you to be able to find the people that will sympathize, that will understand. Because there are a lot of us who deal with depression, and we do understand. We may not all always be able to be at our best for each other, but you're not alone. These are things that I have to remind myself of, especially when my mental health does go down like this. So there does need to be more of a discussion about this. There does need to be more, talking with people who don't experience this as a daily experience or as part of their lives. And that's why those of us who are used to shutting up with our feelings, to shutting off from everyone else, because we don't want to burden anyone else, because we don't want to drag them into our own mental hell. It's important that we talk about what actually happens to us and make sure that people hear us. Because we need a better support system and a better understanding for depression. I mean, for mental illness in general. But I can only truly speak from my experience with depression. And that we need to reduce the stigma against people with mental illness. Anyway, I think I've rambled enough for today. I think I've cried enough into the camera for you guys today. And, if you want to talk about your own experiences with depression, either yours or if someone you know and care about deals with depression, feel free to comment in the comments on this video. I'll do my best to reply. And if I don't reply, it's not that I don't care, because I read every comment and I care about every comment. It just may be that I may not be in a place to respond at that time. But I love you guys so much. More than I think that I can describe in a short period of time. And I'm so happy that you guys watch my videos, that are entertained or perhaps educated, I don't know, by them. But I've been talking for 40 minutes now. And so, I want to thank you guys sincerely for watching this video, for watching my other videos, because one of the things that pulls me out when I'm like this, one of the things that's definitive proof that maybe I'm not a total failure, are the fact that you guys watch my videos. So, thank you for being something that ties me here.